Good morning and welcome to all the participants who have logged in to the 41st webinar of Anekdhara. As you all know, today's theme is Changing Face of Indian Journalism. Welcome to all the participants. So, I will introduce the moderator for today's webinar, Dr. Shalini Narayanan. Dr. Shalini Narayanan is a bureaucrat turned media academic with over 3.5 decades of experience in the media sector. She is from the 1990 batch of the Indian Information Service, and she has had about 23 years of service under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. She was also posted in the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, Delhi, where she was the program director for the officers training as well as for the advertising and public relations PG diploma course. She was honored with the National B School Award for Best Professor Advertising in 2013. Since then, she has been training and teaching at the top civil services academies, including Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration in Mussoorie and the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National uh, Police Academy in Hyderabad. She has also been teaching at leading universities and colleges for their undergraduate and postgraduate programs. Her works include India Connected, Mapping the Impact of New Media in 2016, and the WhatsApp India Story, Inside the Digital Maya Sphere, which was published by Taylor and Francis last year. And Dr. Shalini Narayan is by herself a very erudite person who in handling journalism and media studies. She will handle the webinar today. Over to Shalini. Thank you. I think there is a small connection
Shalini,
problem.
somebody needs to call Shalini. I think there is some communication gap. Meanwhile, I think we should keep the conversation going, perhaps.
So we have with us two speakers. Shalini, are you?
Hello.
Yeah. Over to you, Shalini. Please take it.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Thank you so much, Madhu, for the introduction. And as you mentioned, we are going to be talking about the changing face of Indian journalism today. And that we will be doing with two experts who I'll be introducing shortly. So what we are going to discuss today is about the interplay of media, technology, and society. So let me start with a brief look at the media landscape in India today. It's considered very vibrant. We have nearly 1.5 lakh periodicals being published in 22 scheduled languages as of March 2023. Then we have over 900 television channels, nearly 400 of which cater to news alone. Besides this, we have 388 private FM radio channels and over 950 million internet subscribers as of last year. And just to bring you the scale at which internet penetration has been going up in the country, the decade between 2014 and 2024 actually saw the number of internet subscribers go up by 250 million. That is 250 million. So we seem to have a thriving media business and growth in India. Along with the changes, I also want to bring to your attention the fact that the way we are consuming news has been shifting from print to radio and television to digital. So I come from a generation that has actually seen this shift happening. When we were young, I mean, a long time ago, our households would wake up to the grand patriarch of the house reading the daily physical paper and then switching on the radio to listen to the state broadcaster. And in the evening, the news on Doordarshan was there for us. So for us old timers, physical papers are still important as a daily habit. But even we have started looking at our mobiles first thing in the morning. And oftentimes I find myself keeping the physical paper next to me and looking at my mobile instead. The Digital News Report of 2024, which was published by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, says that 40% people in India are now accessing news through social media. And YouTube and WhatsApp are their main source, followed by television, print, and other online sources. Meanwhile, the challenges before journalists have also changed over time. Gone are the leisurely days of filing one story in a day for a daily newspaper. Now, a journalist needs to have not only writing skills, but also audio and video production skills. For a journalist working for a media house, the same story needs to be done for the print version, the website, as well as the Instagram page and YouTube account of the media organization. Television journalists who used to have the luxury of a camera person and a video editor are now sometimes doing all the three tasks on their own. So yes, media houses have changed, and so has the work of a journalist. So let's look at the journey of Indian media since independence. And we find there are four distinct periods. The first one was from independence to roughly 1970s, where we basically focused on nation building, promoting unity, and protecting our democracy. The mission was to inform and educate. This period was dominated by print and had a public service model. But the emergency saw censorship and a muzzling of the free press. Then came the 80s and the 90s when liberalization saw censorship. Where liberalization came in, and with it, there was a whole expansion of the media with the rise of satellite television, and also investigative journalism came in, and a growth in regional language media in the country. Liberalization also brought with it a market-driven approach. And then came the decade 2000 to 2010. And this was the digital revolution. But this period also saw the problem of paid news and corruption. If you remember the Radia tapes, you know what I'm talking about. And corporates like Reliance entered the sector, and also independent media outlets like The Wire and Scroll.in came up in India. But India's World Press Freedom Index ranking started dropping during this time. This decade was also marked by the rise of the Godi or lapdog media, which is a pejorative term used for pro-government media outlets. And now we are in the age of digital dominance and artificial intelligence. How is journalism going to be impacted by the rise of artificial intelligence? Are journalists going to lose their jobs? Those are some of the questions. And we will, of course, discuss those. The other major problem with the dominance of digital media is of misinformation and how to tackle that. Our last book actually was on WhatsApp, and the title itself said the WhatsApp India story inside the digital Maya sphere. And we wanted to basically emphasize that, it is like Maya, truth has become a kind of casualty. So that's going to be one of our major concerns. And as you know, generative AI has really brought in a disruption. So that's going to be a big concern. Besides that, the plummeting press freedom index of India is now at 159 out of, I think, 180 countries, and is ranked even below Pakistan when it comes to press freedom. You all are aware, of course, that these rankings are done by Reporters Without Borders, and these are done annually, where they take into account all different kinds of ways to measure press freedom, including journalists being put into jail, or the kinds of laws that are operating, and basically the freedom to express and to do your job with integrity. So so press freedom index is one worrying thing that is now there in the media landscape, as well as the reducing pluralism in the newsroom. Because, as you know, two of the biggest conglomerates have taken over most of our major media outlets. And that has resulted in a loss of pluralism in the newsrooms. And as well as there is this issue of trust in the mainstream media. And that has led to the rise of the influencers. And I'm sure Madhavan is going to talk a lot about that, but we'll come to that. And the economic struggles of legacy media. Also, the problem of the declining level of public discourse, which has been, it's been one of those things that really hurts us old timers, because we come from a generation when journalism was a gentleman's profession, kind of. And we also need to look at the kinds of legislations that are there now, including the Digital Personal Protection Act, which was brought in 2023, issues of privacy, surveillance. All of these are what we are really going to focus on today in our session. And I think we'll start with Dr. V.S.Sambandan for his views, because he's seen it all. And he's at present the Chief Administrative Officer of the Hindu Center for Politics and Public Policy. He holds a PhD degree in economics from the University of Madras, India, and an MBA degree from Bournemouth University, UK. During his journalism career, he has reported and written extensively on economics and social issues, and served as the Hindu's foreign correspondent in Sri Lanka for 6 years during the Sri Lankan separatist conflict. The highlights of his journalism career include interviews with scholars and heads of state, such as the author of The Clash of Civilizations, Samuel Huntington, noted economist Jeffrey Sachs, the former president of Sri Lanka, Chandrika Kumaratunga, and Mahinda Rajapaksa, and the former president of the Maldives, Maumoon Abdul Gayoom. His areas of interest include economic and social policy, politics and political communication, and political economy. He has served as a member of the Board of Studies for Economics, University of Madras, and member of the Academic Council, Dwarkadas Govardhan Das Vaishnav College in Chennai. So over to you, Sam, for your comments.
Thank you very much, Shalini, for your generous introduction. Thank you, Madhu, and your team at Anekdhara for inviting me. And most of all, thank you to Anekdhara for doing such a public-spirited webinars quite frequently. We look forward to more of them. With this, with these opening remarks, to thank Shalini, Madhu, Mr. Narayanan, Madhavan Narayanan, and everybody in the backroom operations. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I feel it a distinct, not just an honor, but also an obligation to speak to all of you today about the changing face of journalism, how it has changed. Why is it an obligation? Is because we are probably read, and most of us are probably heard, but very little goes into understanding the process. So what Madhu, I, and Shalini would try to do is unpack the process for you, and then we could take it from there. As I come from a print background and having all my journalism has been with one newspaper and with one organization and with one medium, which is the print. Though I've had some experience in online journalism, that also ties into print because it's for the Hindu and its group of newspapers. I've done a bit of magazine journalism, again, as part of the Hindu group of newspapers. So I try to bring in a perspective from that angle. And where do I start? I start with where Shalini started, with print as the staple in which we grew up. as youngsters, print as the staple in which we did our journalism as well. Print had a one-day news cycle. If for a newspaper editor, it was a one-day news cycle. And at the end of the day, the newspaper's team would put together what the news was, and then we'll go on with life. It was hectic. It's not that it's very relaxed. It's very hectic, as anybody who's been in a newsroom and in deciding the news contents would ever. What has happened is that initially newspaper journalists. I come from a reporting background with a little bit of editing as well. So the main pressure was, so to say, from news agencies like the ones that my esteemed and distinguished senior colleague, Mr. Narayanan, represented. So news journalists would have to be wary of what an agency journalist would do, and it was competition there, especially to give an anecdote. It would make it much easier. Suppose there is a bomb blast. A newspaper reporter has got till end of day to figure out what the details are and give it accurately. But by then the agencies are already out there. And remember that agencies are competing with each other for be picked up by newspapers. So sometimes there would be mismatches in death tolls, for instance, because a newspaper would look at what they want. So this is one little challenge that the newspaper has. Ultimately, the newspaper would trust its own correspondent and go by his or her version. So that was one competition that news journalists had to start with. Then came radio with on the hour, every hour. There was classic radio, and it was more as a medium through which news journalists and the news desk would get a feel of what's happening in the day. That was quickly taken over by rolling news, perhaps on the minute, every minute, by television. And here I would draw from what Shalini so perceptively brought in, about 1 lakh plus publications and 900 odd news channels. Now you see this disproportionate influence of television news on deciding news agendas. That has become one of the issues that underlie the changing face of what readers get to read. But again, a tough news editor and a good newspaper team would know go by good judgment rather than be led by television. So the other downside with television and compared with newspaper is that newspapers give the width and the space to discuss issues in detail and at length. If I may indulge, I think there's a lot of talk about the recent terror attack and how everything with Pakistan should be seized. And we talk about the usual thing about bombing them, blah, etc., 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 and the Indus Water Treaty. Now, a good television program should have gone into the details of it, could have even done a quick documentary on it, what it means. But what do we have? We have sound and fury. But what do newspapers present? If I may, from today's Hindu, you have a half a page story on what it means. It's called Storm Beneath the Waters, Indus Water Treaty. So this kind of in-depth perspective a newspaper can give. But that is not all about what is delivered. It is also about what is consumed and what is required. We live in a state of mind where there is declining attention span, and people want it on the run. So newspapers still plow along and give news what is needed. Now, when it comes to television, the biggest difficulty which television has introduced, and to me personally, and I think my distinguished colleagues would agree or would also have a counter view on that, is the changing vocabulary of news usage. A newspaper would, in classical journalism, to which many newspapers still adhere to, would never use the word "our prime minister," would never use the word "our country." It's always third person, the detached view of looking at things. But television came in and brought in this "our prime minister," "our country," 100 decibels plus kind of voltage journalism, which people took to. Because news and information flows into individual psychology as well, in collective psychology as well, which I think a more experienced colleague like Mr. Narayan would touch upon perhaps. So this changing vocabulary has morphed in a very big way with the advent of digital medium, with the advent of social media, with the advent of internet medium. Again, Shalini was very kind enough to give the numbers there. And again, there you see a very disproportionate influence on public mind. So what was earlier a conversation that would be held in a drawing room, for instance, between or in a cafe, for instance, between friends, or in a pub between friends, or in just an informal chat, has now become mainstream version of what it is. What's happened is that the due diligence process that a journalist, including a television journalist or radio journalist, would do from as a reporter, a due diligence process would be getting information, verifying it, accessing multiple sources, source cultivation, verifying if it is accurate, if it is correct, and then give a report. And then, more importantly, comes a very important news filter: is it newsworthy? Which was taken by a person detached from the reporter. I, as a reporter, would think that everything I write is newsworthy. But my editor and his team or her team would have the larger picture in front of them, and they would know what is the newsworthiness of this, how to feature it, where to feature it. But if the same I were to do it on my website or my YouTube, I would just pump everything out without any mediation, without any perspective in the larger game of things. So this absence of perspective has also led to another very important calamity, if I may, which is the prevalence and spread of fake news. As it is widely said, a lie is halfway around the world when truth is just wearing its bootstraps on. So this has caused a lot of damage to the news ecosystem. But again, I would not say it's all doom and gloom with the advent of digital and social media. There have been voices that have not been heard, that have been heard and picked up by mainstream news media. But there is a lot of abundance of caution exercised in that process. But the downside has also been the advent of unidirectional communication. Without going into names, many leaders just believe in posting something on Twitter and being done with it. The process of a press conference where there is a two-way communication between the news source and the reporter acting in good faith on behalf of the reader has gone. The news reporter acting in good faith on behalf of the radio listener is gone. The news reporter acting on behalf of the television viewer is gone. It's just unidirectional communication with absolutely no challenge or no scope for counter questions. So these are the downsides of what has happened. So to sum up, if I may, we moved from a 24-hour news cycle into a rolling minute news cycle. We've moved from informed competition in the form of news agencies to competition from everywhere in forms of everybody with a mobile phone and an internet connection is now a news producer and also a news consumer, what they would call a prosumer. He's both a producer, she is both a producer and a consumer. So what has happened is that there has been a babble of voices, a cacophony of views, and there has been a complete obliteration of formal journalism and its language and its vocabulary. All these things put together, to me, sort of either balance or outweigh, if I may, the advantages posed by the advent of internet, which in its initial days was seen to be a messiah for the unheard, where the voices of the unheard would be heard. But let's see where it goes from now. The prognosis is that journalism in its form would always prevail. And how best we make of journalism is also dependent a lot on the general public voting with their eyes and ears. As they would say in democracy, every democracy deserves the leaders it gets. So it would be with some variation in the media landscape as well. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Shalini, Mr. Narayan, Madhu, thank you very much for your opportunity and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Sam, for those for putting in to words what we all are thinking about. At this juncture, I'd like to ask Mr. Madhavan Narayanan to come in and weigh in on the subject. But just to introduce him briefly, Madhavan is an editor, journalist, writer, and columnist with more than 35 years of experience in both Indian and international environments. He has worked for media organizations and publications including Reuters, The Economic Times, Business Standard, and Hindustan Times. Madhavan is also featured as a commentator on BBC Radio, ET Now, and Mirror Now, and writes regularly for The Quint, The Economic Times, The New Indian Express, and Vion. His recent ventures with partners include the Knowledge Factory, an annual festival of insights and ideas. He has also translated a 1980 Tamil novel on the Chennai film industry by acclaimed writer Sujata Rangarajan into English, which has been published by HarperCollins India. So I know you bring with you a lot of insight into the digital media communication in India. Madhavan, would you want to tell our viewers about what you think where we are headed?
Thank you, Shalini, for the fine introduction, very kind words. And of course, Sam, Dr. Sambandan, who insists that we should call him Sam. As the old saying goes, we discussed with Shalini yesterday the format of the show that we'll be discussing each for 20 minutes. And after that, there will be 10 minutes of each of us so that we fill in on each other and also address questions as we go along. So it will be another opportunity when we hear, and I could always say, play it again, Sam, as the old saying goes. Let me begin by contexting. It was very good to listen to Sam describing what I call the beautiful and somewhat lost innocent word of print journalism. So I'm going to sketch out the context for this and then bring in the current context so that we know where we historically stand. And sometimes I say hysterically stand in the state of Indian journalism today. Let's first go up to what journalism was nicely expected to be and where it was constrained already and has been more in recent times, so that we understand both the constraints and the opportunities and the challenges within journalism as in its changing phase. So theoretically, at least in India, we have something called the freedom of expression, which is part of the fundamental rights of the Constitution. But as you know, there is also the provision for reasonable restrictions on the media. And unlike the US, where there is something called the First Amendment that protects free speech, in India, we have no such provisions. And on the contrary, we only have provisions for restrictions, say, for public safety or anything. And in recent times, that has increased more because of things like the Information Technology Act and other kinds of digital media-related controls on which people like Dr. Shalini Narayanan will explain more. I will not go into the details, but let's take it as a given that there are things like the Section 6A of the Information Technology Act or the takedown provisions of the media regarding controversial digital content, in which the government indirectly or directly plays a role of a questionable censor or obstructor in the realm of freedom of expression, in which we are already constrained by the fact that the media in India, I would speak with reference to India in general, but I will also explain how we are part of a global problem right now in journalism. So we have no extra independence or freedom apart from what is available to the average citizen. And I'm reminded of Jean-Jacques Rousseau's famous statement during the French Revolution that man is born free, but he's in chains everywhere. And right now, the media is also in chains, and I'll be explaining more chains as we go along to address some of the questions that are being put in the box along my conversation here. And there is a funny line by A.J. Lieblin, who was a New Yorker writer, who said that the freedom of the press belongs to only those who own one. So I'll be addressing that part of the freedom also. Some of the constraints come from the government regulations, restrictions, and constitutional provisions, and others come from ownership issues and day-to-day running issues that curtail the independence or the freedom of the journalist. Now, let me take a step back from where Sam spoke about how print was authentic and in so many ways, fact checks, verification, patient regurgitation of facts. And all this was part of a privilege of being a consumer or a producer of print journalism. With the coming of television and what you call new media, including digital media like social media and uh, YouTube channels, and this has only become more complicated in an environment. So we are in what I call a perfect storm environment where various factors, including political, regulatory, and technological factors, are collectively creating a new challenge for journalism, which has lost its innocence that used to be. Now, what it means in practical terms is that journalism has lost what I call its middle class character. No, there was a time when journalists were typical middle class people, where the people who read the old fashioned print were also reasonably well educated and literate, often in English language, and there was less of regional language media, and therefore there was an unstated consensus on what journalism is. And for India, it was further fortified by the fact that we had parties like the Congress Party, which wanted to bring British-style democracy into India, which basically means recognizing and nurturing the separation of powers between judiciary and executive and legislature, and also locating media as a fourth pillar of society, or what they call the watchdog. Now, in hindsight, all this was full of good intentions with no institutional framework or financial models or processes that would sustain this. So this became a building with a weak foundation, and it being shaken by new developments in technology, which is why some of the issues are relevant in a historical context. Now, let me say, however, that this is not a new problem. It is an old problem which is on steroids, which is because some of the old problems existed always. For instance, there was so-called tabloid journalism or pulp journalism or yellow journalism, which was part of the problem much before print was, supplemented or added or overtaken by TV or digital. The low-cost ability to launch TV channels or social media and stuff like that. So even when New York Times, which is, to mention what Sam said, editor decided what is worth printing. New York Times has got a slogan, all the news that is fit to print. And therefore, that basically means the editor is a respected figure who decides what you will read, and he's respected for that. Now, there's a new narrative. In fact, the word narrative has become very, very important in both politics, history, as well as journalism now, because some people are challenging facts on the basis of the concept of the narrative. So, which means that even if you're factually accurate, you're accused of painting a picture to create an impression. And therefore, even old-fashioned journalism like the New York Times, which has a famous adversary in Donald Trump, is now called, some kind of a foreign agent or anti-national and things like that. Old-fashioned journalism is considered sometimes, strangely enough, not as objective purveyor of stats, but as some kind of a private censor, which is suppressing democratic voices. Now, that is a new problem. Now, even there, earlier readership was not very high. New York Times was respected, but New York Post had a higher circulation. You had National Enquirer and all sorts of local journals in regional centers of US. In India, that became very similar in the 1980s with the growth of first of Indian language papers and increasingly some of them becoming more right-wing, so to speak, more owned and operated by people with different ideologies. So it became more democratized, but also more, complicated. Now, all this affected the old-fashioned print universe that Sam was speaking about. Now, let's first, let me go in because some of these issues are related to business model and financial issues. and they get interwoven or tangled with ideological issues. Let me address very briefly the nationalism versus journalism question that some of them spoke about. How we never said our media or no, our country. We only said India. Now, even yesterday, there was a very heated debate on Twitter featuring two part owners, or so to speak, of the Hindu, where Sam works. There is the headline in the Hindu talked about Pakistan imposing trade restrictions on India. The second one below featured Modi's cry for revenge against Pakistan. Now, there was an argument between, involving Malini Pathasati, who's been the editor of the Hindu, saying that the Modi news should have been on top. So, which is like saying you have to put nationalism above plain news in some cases. So, who decides all this? So, this kind of problem has always been there, which has been now amplified because now it's part of the social media discourse. Now, coming to a very important aspect, all this can happen and fact checks can happen, verification can happen, and only when the readers or the viewers demand some kind of authenticity. And at the same time, the institutions or the companies in question also have the financial resources and the time and the incentive to do so. So that has been lacking, because if you look at today, advertising is no longer a major supporter of print media. Advertising has either gone to Instagram or consumer-oriented social media, or it has gone to search-based advertisements that Google gets, or TV gets a lot of it in some cases. Now, even TV doesn't have that kind of a viewership as it is assumed. We watch a lot of TV and we think it is very important, but it need not be so, as I'll explain further down the line. What it means, however, is that people have less money to invest in good journalism. And what it also means is that government has become a big advertiser. So apart from holding the stick of regulatory power, it also has the carrots of advertisement power. So a lot of the TV media likes to be on the good side of the government and get money from there. There's also the problem that media has historically been seen as an influential industry with prestige associated with it, so just like aviation. And we also know that in the Hindi media, for instance, the real estate people are investing in media not for either in the public interest or to earn money, but to support their existing investments, because media connections and being in the media opens doors to bureaucrats and officials and politicians, which is also explaining some of the issues raised in a question in the box alongside to me. Corporate influence and political influence are both influencing media, because, for instance, if you take Dhirubhai Ambani's Ambani empire, which now has lots of money from everything from telecom to petrochemical. Now, Network 18, it controls this a very small part of the business empire. Similarly, NDTV, which used to be an independent media house, is now part of the Adani Group. Now, these media entities are not there to make profit for the owners, unlike, let's say, the Times of India Group, which remains very committed to a lot of good journalism because its main source of revenue is this group. So media becomes more of an influence or propaganda vehicle to get connections or to influence public opinion on behalf of the industrial group or behalf of the government, and supported by government advertisements. So that is one challenge. So in fact, even in the good old days, the media used to be called the jute press and things like that. But now it has become amplified. So on the one hand, you have the fragmentation of the media by digital sources. On the other hand, you have issues such as corporate control. Now, that brings me to the next question. Who can we solve this problem? On the one hand, there was a time when media barons like Rupert Murdoch and Robert Maxwell or Kerry Packer were seen as or the Jains in India were seen as the powerful, influential people who control the media by ownership. Now, which is what led to labeling saying the freedom of the press belongs to only those who own one. But there's also been a positive side where even groups like the Hindu speak for the marginalized people or the Dalits or gender-based issues, because the well-intentioned custodial media, as I call it, custodial ownership, where even the elite ownership or a baron stands up for some values. Now, Ramnath Goenka fought for against the emergency using Indian Express. Hindu had its own campaign in the Bofors scan. So it has been a lot of debatable issue, but it is interesting that some barons have been acting in public interest, whereas Rupert Murdoch is notorious for dumping down the thing, the whole media industry. To some extent, I think it's important to understand that because of the rise of democracy, as well as the rise of social media, as well as digital media, democratization of old voices has become so loud that the middle class character is now replaced by propaganda or impressions or advertisement like media, which is a storytelling problem as opposed to ownership problem, because ordinary people do not understand very sober information. In fact, when we started this session, we had a mild debate on whether we should call it changing face of journalism or a crisis in journalism. So if you call it crisis, it's relatively speaking sensationalist, but that's what attracts audiences. So nobody wants to just come to a sober headline. Everybody is not an academic or a bureaucrat. So there is a huge communication related challenge on how to communicate serious stuff in a way that is intelligible and accessible to the masses or the people. So as I call it, there are ownership issues. But if you take today's media, there are independent digital media companies like News Laundry, News Minute, The Scroll, The Wire. They're all doing a decent job. But even some of them tend to be owned by families or individuals, and there is a baron syndrome there also. So what we need, perhaps, is a reconciliation of financial issues, technological issues, as well as some of the political issues, so that old-fashioned journalism that believes in factual accuracy and responsibility is also made financially viable and technologically savvy. And I would say, because we can come back to some of the other issues later, but one critical issue that needs to be addressed is that not only fact checking is important, verification is important, the amplification and the verification of fact checking is also important, so that it's not just confined to a few people, but ordinary people who are subject to propaganda, whether it is the right or the left propaganda, get to somehow consume things that makes them more meaningfully informed citizens, not victims of propaganda of one kind or the other. Now, that is a storytelling challenge as opposed to ownership challenge or regulatory challenge. Now, so in this, I want to place in context the artificial intelligence and things like that. I feel that they can be better storytelling tools. Example, I saw in the Delhi Times yesterday this wonderful picture, which I could, because I'm a seasoned, experienced journalist, I could immediately sense that this is not a typical picture. Please take a look at this lady here. Now, it looks like an authentic photograph, which is a cookery related story, but I could sense that it was an artificial intelligence generated picture. Now, I want to turn this on this head. AI can also be a storytelling tool for even credible old-fashioned journalism. So print is glorified for accuracy and fact-checking. But please, if there is an opportunity, the content of print should be used as a raw material to generate stories using AI and video, so that more people access the research and the process. So you should not confuse the process with the product. There is a saying by Marshall McLuhan, medium is the message, which is that when technology changes, the message also changes. So television, if you go to the history of communication, theater gave way to cinema, print gave way to television. Now television is gave way to interactive digital mass media. All of this provides both opportunity and challenges. So we have to understand the storyteller's challenge in this, so that the old-fashioned credibility of old-fashioned print is reimagined in a new universe. For that, financially speaking, I am in favor of two constructive ideas. One is, I feel that news media as a collective, those who believe in credible journalism should argue in favor of infrastructure status for journalism. Anything that is subjected not to controls, but to meaningful oversight by, let us say, joint parliamentary panels or a panel of credible advisors can give tax concessions or get tax concessions for media so that resources are invested properly. There is also the question of they are talking about elections. People talk about electoral bonds, which was controversial. But I am in favor of some kind of crowdfunding of media, where not what I call stratified crowdfunding, in which some of the people who are ethically interested in good journalism will become what I call micro barons. No, you instead of individual ownership of barons, you could have collective ownership of an enlightened set of so-called middle class, but those who believe in small industries, or people with some kind of philanthropic resources can collectively come together and fund media. And I can even think of media bonds or media trusts that can fund it. So we need to evolve alternative models so that the new technologies are turned from challenges into opportunities. And because the mass cannot be made to behave like the class, but the mass is part of democracy. You cannot abolish the mass, but you need to develop interlocutory mechanisms and institutions and processes so that storytelling excellence meets authentic journalism in a new kind of an equation. I do want to speak about the rise of influencers in this. If we have the time, I'll take 2 more minutes. I found something very interesting, that while social media is being criticized, for instance, I have more than 200,000 followers on Twitter, but this was in the good old days when Twitter was very important. Now Elon Musk is gone and spoiled it, because now I don't even have followers who want to follow me. You know, algorithms are intersecting with my followers as well as the people I follow. So there is a gatekeeping of a kind that I'm not fond of. But at the same time, YouTube is excelling, because I found something very, very interesting. Ravish Kumar, who was in NDTV, today has 13 million YouTube followers, subscribers. Dhruv Rathi has 28 million. That is 2.8 crores. There's a lot of people. And I also found that there is in fact, let me draw some of the research I got into, because I found it very, very interesting that there was a January article this year which tracked the influencers by circulation and rank. And some of them I haven't even heard of, but they are in the news and politics business. So you have somebody, of course, everybody knew about Ranveer Allahabadiya because of the controversy he got into because of some sexual remarks. He had 10 million followers, subscribers. But there is somebody called Nitish Rajput who has 6.4 million. There is a Lalan Top Show, which is owned by India Today, which has 32 million. Then Priya Jain, who I never heard of till today, has 4 million. Now, she goes and presents videos on the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution. So there are illustrative, educative YouTubers. Gaurav Thakur has 6.7 million. So, and then of course, Desh Bhakt, who's a former media executive, Akash Banerjee, has 5.2 million. So there is something called the Think School, and Abhishar Sharma and Shubhankar Mishra. Some are new to the business, some are old journalists reinventing themselves. Now, the important point I want to emphasize here is that these are to journalism what resellers are to products like toothpaste or soap. You know, they repackage print journalism. I know, for instance, that when I tweet, my followers include some of these influential YouTubers, including Dhruv Rathi. So they go, they pick up ideas or research or facts from me and repackage it for the mass audience in a regional language and add the bells and whistles to it. Some of it may be desirable, some of it may be not desirable. So democracy is alive and kicking in its own way. But what we need to do is to preserve the credibility of research, reportage, and fact verification, so that the repackaging industry starts benefiting rather than obstructing the old-fashioned journalism. This requires, well, as I said earlier, new financing models, new institutional structures, and what I call the de-baronization and the re-democratization of what I call custodial capitalism, as opposed to simple pursuit of profit, so that things will be more viable and credible rather than merely profitable and certainly controversial. Thank you. I hope I've been of help.
Oh, indeed. That was a very enlightening discussion. The points that you made. One thing I wanted to ask, you were suggesting that, there should be something like crowdfunding of media to enable, real journalism to be alive and kicking. But do you think that has already happened, in the sense, like, you have your News Laundry, you have News Minute, you have Dhruv Rathi, you have so many of these, independent voices, which are basically being funded, not Dhruv Rathi, but the others by subscription. So, would you say it's already come to pass?
Good question, because I didn't have the time. We didn't elaborate on this. I'm glad you asked that question, Shalini. First of all, I would expect people like yourself, such as researchers, to do more elaborate research on the funding models and the profitability, because that is one aspect of new media that has not been properly researched yet. I was lucky to find this Rolling Stone magazine article, which at least lists some of the most popular influential YouTubers. Now, subscription models are a double-edged sword. I was thinking about this morning. Subscription generates revenue. There is a new concept called membership, in which special members have access to editors from these organizations, so that they have the joy of interacting with senior or credible journalists, and they have one-to-one meetings. So the membership model, followed by subscription, then followed by advertisement generated by views, collectively generate revenues for these organizations. And on top of that, there is also the issue of some, what you call, philanthropic grants in some cases, like Huffington Post and all. But in my opinion, there are two problems here. One is that these things are not easily scalable, because as I said, some of these, including Quint, which I write for, they're all still family controlled. Now, they cannot scale up on in a manner where resources can be shared on a large scale in the public interest. They also have the problem of paywalls, because when you have membership only content or subscriber only content, so therefore some of the issues related to public interest, which should go wider, get restricted to a few readers. So one way is to do for what I call the repackagers. A YouTuber can access a well-researched story on News Laundry, and then take it as a one man's raw material, end product becomes another person's raw material, and that model is possible. But I feel that we also need to, I have some constructive, innovative ideas I'm planning to discuss with some of these entrepreneurs, called unpaywalling. So if you unpaywall some of these things, then you have a larger audience, because everybody is not going to pay for content they ought to read. This is a sad fact of today. So we are living in what I call the age of transactional morality. Both the investors as well as the customers need to have a sense of transactional value to be able to give, if not their money, their attention. So, for instance, today I can subscribe to New York Times. I don't, because I don't have the time, and I'm good enough with news.google. And if a senior journalist like me is like this, imagine ordinary people. So we need to create a massification of good content, for which that is why I feel that resource sharing, media bonds, and infrastructure status can go a long way. And with what I call stratified crowdfunding, which means that investors will get value by being part of an advisory council or something, because at the moment investors have no financial returns and there is nothing that they can clutch on to and say. So only that gives the crony capitalists and the big money backs to fill the vacuum created by the absence of what I call stratified crowdfunding. You get it? Crowdfunding cannot come from ordinary people. It has to come from an enlightened set of what I call micro-philanthropists.
Right. Yeah. So just to return to another issue, if I may ask Sam to come in here. When digital media came in, at that point in time, at least in academia, there was this kind of euphoria that the public sphere is going to get enlarged, and it's going to it will enable all marginalized voices to come in. It will expand the public sphere. So I just wanted to ask you, Sam, whether you think that has happened really.
Thank you, Shalini. With regard to the answer to this very profound question is both yes and no. Yes, it has happened. It has happened. For instance, there are many news stories that have fallen by the wayside, but for a person on the spot picking it up and amplifying it, so to say, which has sort of led conscientious journalists to follow it up, because journalists have. I would welcome Mr. Narayan to chip in this as well, because journalists have a set of sources. We cannot have everybody as a source. We have even the widest range of sources cannot cover the population. So in that respect, a person somewhere in some hamlet has something where perhaps a journalist doesn't have a ground source. So it comes up, and then if it's a good story, if it's a good report, definitely there have been quite a few that have been picked up. For instance, the reported suicide of a schoolgirl in a remote village in Tamil Nadu. It became really a big story based on a YouTuber's version. The voice of the unheard have caught on. These have happened. And simultaneously, what has happened is that, as you and Mr. Narayan rightly said, the exponential growth of big money, of big capital, has sort of subsumed this as well. Twitter started with a very good intention, but it's gone all the way, it's gone everywhere now. And predatory capital, which tend to buy off smaller units, is one thing. And of course, the old malices that have been dogging journalism, journalists being bought off. These are not new. Like, there have been instances in the past as well, in the glorious past as well. So where integrity comes at where integrity is compromised, there is always a scope to bring it down. So in short, the answer is both yes and no. Yes, it has had a good beginning. Yes, it does have a good present as well, but no, it's under severe threat. Yeah.
Shalini, I'd be grateful if you could rephrase that question for me, because I was thinking around the topic. I lost sense of that precision, so that I can address this.
No, just that whether you think that the coming of digital media has actually led to a democratization of the public sphere as we were anticipating, or not?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, but sadly so. Let me put it this way. I've always believed that, I'm a big believer. It's very controversial. I believe in a certain sense of what I call strategic inequality in the media. By that, I mean that all people are equal as voters and citizens, but some people are, the people that we call mass are themselves not able to distinguish between factual accuracy and not. So I worked for Reuters for 12 years, where our value system was based on speed, reliability, and accuracy. Fact checks and verification is part of the process. So many people forget that democratization enables free voices, but it doesn't ensure credible voices. So we need, which is why both the processes and the people with integrity are critical to journalism. And that cannot be legislated or bought. That has to be nurtured through a process of curation of people and setting up processes such as sourcing and cross-checking. Now, which is why you need an institutional approach to journalism, and digital media increases the democratization of voice, but the voice becomes noise. So we need more voice, as I say. So, which is why I think we need what I call custodial journalism. Whereas, it's like the Mahatma Gandhi's trusteeship capitalism. It is the media equivalent. You need trustees of credible journalism, and we need to build institutions and processes for that.
Right. So actually, I was about to ask you a question leading to this subject you just talked about. I was listening to Yuval Noah Harari, and he was talking about how truth is more expensive, complicated, and painful compared to fiction. So he was saying his argument was, if fiction is easier, less complicated, less painful, less expensive, why will people go in for the truth? They will go for fiction. So I think you maybe you'd like to answer that question also.
I love this question, Shalini. I'm going to answer that because I'm also a fan and a student of literature as well as filmmaking. In fact, I often stand at the cross section. If you look at it, the list of Nobel Prize winners in literature, you'll find that a lot of them are actually talking facts and not fiction. And because they know that a fiction that communicates truth is better than a fact that obfuscates truth, because the intersectional word in social linguistic terms is narrative and story. The word story is common to fiction and journalism. That's a very interesting. The word narrative is common to politics and journalism. So we need to understand the politics of the narrative, politics of storytelling, and politics of fiction. And I take inspiration from filmmakers and the literature to say, while being a journalist. In fact, I'm sometimes accused of doing a good job of that, which is that you use visual tools, you use contexting, you use analogies and metaphors to tell the story better. And that one way is to preserve the sanctity of journalism while appropriating some of the tools historically associated with filmmaking or literature. And the ultimately public impressions are formed in the minds, as Yuval Noah Harari says, by, let's say, fiction. I know, for instance, that some people who are in the advertising industry use advertising in which they, I might use the word fool, quote unquote, fool the client into buying into a socially relevant idea for a brand campaign. Okay. So there is always, the creative mind always finds its way. So in fact, I am interested in, my next interest is actually in creativity in public policy. So people are not being creative enough. So once you understand the power of creativity, then nothing can stop you from doing whatever you want to. Which is why I often say that good journalism is not a function of content, but a function of intent. So you have to understand the intent, and once the intent is clear, other things can fall into place. But there is a challenge, because when one wall gets broken, you have to build the wall or you have to break another wall. And this is where I think some of the challenges of storytelling comes in, which is why I use the AI visual to say AI is a challenging journalism. I will want to turn it into a storytelling opportunity, because you can use now AI to turn a good print story into a visual story in a matter of seconds. I know, if you know, in fact, I'm feeling bad because I'm of a certain age where I can't roll up my sleeves and go to the newsroom. I feel like screaming at these young journalists, and what kind of stuff you're doing? You're great technology, do it now. 80% of what I did when I was 25 years old can be done now by automated technologies. So that gives me 80% more time to tell the story better. So I take it as a challenge, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. And yes, it did address my question. I think it's time to take up the questions that have been coming in the chat box. Oops, sorry. So one of the questions that is there is, how has the emergence of regional and vernacular media reshaped the narrative diversity in Indian journalism? Either of you can take it if you like.
Sam, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can I go first, please, and then Mr. Narayan could join? Sure. First, a little caveat. I would not like to use the word vernacular. It represents the rule rather than a thing. Just for the colleague, the gentle lady who posed the question, I would like to call it Indian languages, regional languages, whatever we may. And two, yes, I think to a large extent, the Indian language newspapers, including the non-English Indian language newspapers, right? Okay. I think I've got it somewhat close to truth now. The non-English Indian language newspapers have, and media have a far, far, far wider reach than the English medium languages. That said, in spheres of influence, the English language newspapers do wield a certain amount of, or so they would like to believe, so we would like to believe, that we read by policymakers and decision makers, takers. So yes, it does represent a very vast section of the readership. And B, yes, it does give a huge range of variety to journalism. And I would like to both borrow and lead and request Ms. Narayan to lead into it. With the advent of AI and Google Translate and so many other opportunities, I think there is a space for a lot of propagation of local stories, as they would say, that are being confined to regional languages, especially features. News, I think somehow it would filter up and come in, but I think there is a scope for that as well. Thank you, Geeta.
Yeah, I think Shalini, let me answer that question.
Sorry, Shalini.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shalini.
Yes, please. Yes.
Listen,
Yes. Go ahead, please.
personally, I'm very excited by many things, but I'm no longer in an age where I can afford to get excited or nobody, meaning there is enough work for 2,000 journalists now in a newsroom. I call it the blue ocean journalism, which means that there's so many voices out there. The idea is to get them together, collated. As I say, I have lots of stuff in the head of a book on this. There is collation, curation, comprehension, what I call the 6 C's of journalism and storytelling. So we can do a lot with it. Now, the problem with regional language, as I call it, in fact, I call Hindi as a regional language. This is one of the biggest problems now in India, that regional is called vernacular, which is a colonial usage. But again, it is assumed that Hindi is national, others are not. So things are not a function of language. It's also a function of regional needs, regional perspectives, as well as what I call, I'm a strong believer in the fact that the most dangerous word in both journalism and politics is we. Who are the we? The us that you are talking about may not be the us that the poorer people or the remote people or the regional language people involved. I see a lot of science content today. I stumbled on something very interesting. I was reading Dinakaran. I'm a regular also on Tamil channels these days because I also go live on Hindi YouTube channels sometimes. I'm blessed by multilingual upbringing. So I find that in each language, there is one thing defined by needs, another thing by perspective. Needs are like where they are right now, what makes sense to them. Today, the role of the governor is more important to Tamil Nadu because of various political reasons. But I also saw in Dinakaran today an excellent story on a student inventor who has come up with a pair of boots that tackles landmines, Now, I would love to see that story in the national media in an English language paper. So let us not assume that regional language only means a local demonstration against some power plant or something like that, or about the plight of tribals. There is a lot of good content floating in regional language, which needs to be what I call osmotically observed into national media. So the whole idea of national media itself is theoretically questionable. But as long as the national media stays relevant by becoming a voice for the distant regions, it will remain national. Otherwise, it will be dismissed as English, elite-speaking Lutyens media. The Lutyens media's problem was that it confused its own opinion with hard facts, and it was imagining at a time which it should have been observing. So observation is very central to good journalism, both silent observation as well as interactions. I have made a lot of mistakes to learn. For instance, I got some election predictions wrong in 91. I got it right in 93 because instead of just talking to people in a Q&A format, I started reading their silences, their body languages. So reading the body language and reading regional language is both important for national journalism. And I believe that ultimately we are talking about a democracy in which voices are not, necessarily credible. Now, let me address also that question which is there in the box in front of me. We are seeing the rise of citizen journalism because modern recording mediums such as smartphones we should see journalism as a shared responsibility. I personally don't like the word citizen journalism here because citizens are citizens. They are not journalists. Do you hear of citizen doctors? Do you hear of citizen architects? Then why should journalism is just like computer engineering. It is an expertise that involves skills, processes, experience, upbringing. And therefore, to reduce journalism It's like saying citizen politics. You have a vote, it doesn't make you a politician. And you can scribble something on your smartphone, it doesn't make you a journalist. Journalism is a lot of processes, and therefore I believe that, I'm a bit emotional about this, because these words like blogs and citizen journalism is insulting experienced, skill-based journalism. And I think that the only way we can, it's not a shared responsibility, it's a custodial responsibility. And journalists should behave like credible journalists, and people who are not journalists should start respecting it and financing it, and those who believe in it. So in fact, I have coined the term for journalists as social judiciary. We are the social judiciary. Just as judges decide who's right and who's wrong, journalists, credible journalists, decide what is worth propagating and what is not propagating, with a clear, transparent set of principles and processes, which is where I feel, so you only get the journalism you deserve or you pay for.
Right. So there is this question from Mr. Devendra Singh, which says, has fear completely overtaken journalism like other professions, which is affecting even facts being conveyed? What would you say to that?
May I take the question?
Start off and then Mr. Madhavan. I think, with all respect, Mr. Singh, the answer is no. Fearless journalism continues, will continue, and will endure. Perhaps what is being confused here is the sense of being subjugated or being browbeaten into admittance. Let's say that please do stay reassured that when you talk about journalists and journalism, no, there's no question of fear overtaking journalists or journalism. Mr. Narayanan?
Okay. Yeah, let me, one of my favorite old saying is a British idiom, which says, truth will out, is that truth will always be discovered. And if fearless journalists are not allowed to be fearless or browbeaten by various things, earlier there used to be something called mercenary journalism. Today we have what I call EMI journalism. Journalists have car loans and home loans, so they end up paying EMIs, and therefore they are silenced, if not by the barons, who were at least by the fear that they'll have to, their better lifestyles, unlike the old journalists, is now being indirectly curtailed. But the good news is that there's a whole tribe of new sort of people, including the founders of News Laundry or News Minute, who start independent voices. So they become, over a period of time, as the rise of YouTubers shows, they become the new normal, and the old people will find themselves marginalized, and they are like the zamindars who are replaced by the new kind of political leadership that emerged during the independence movement. But let me point to one thing. One of my favorite naughty sayings is by Sir James Goldsmith, who said that when you marry your mistress, a vacancy is created. So when journalists start behaving like political propagandists, some other class of people rise to fill that gap. And today we are seeing stand-up comedians. Now, why is the government so afraid of Kunal Kamra? Because he's taking some of the journalistic content and spinning it into comedy through a creative storytelling things. And in fact, if you saw in Maharashtra recently, they are not afraid of, the politicians were not afraid of what Kunal Kamra said. They started despising the fact that he sang, because you convert something into a musical cadence and it becomes more consumable. So one of the reasons why advertising industry succeeds is because there is a saying in advertising, if you cannot say it, sing it. So now the comedian comes and starts singing journalism. So immediately that content gets absorbed. In fact, one thing which I mentioned to Shalini in the back, which I couldn't elaborate on, is, you have to start doing research in neuroscience. I am a big student of neuroscience in consumption. So you have to really understand your audience, and ultimately understanding your audience is not just about who they are outwardly, but how their brain structures are. So, I find it as a storytelling challenge. So therefore, truth will out. And the only thing is, just like in stock market terminology, there is something called the black swan effect. I'm coining today in the honor of Anekdhara a term called black swan journalism. So there can be black swan journalism where somebody else will start doing the job of a journalist. And in fact, it's already happening in among stand-up comedians. But you cannot keep people suppressed. The British colonialists tried it; it didn't work. Postcards
Okay.
started floating. So today you can,
Right.
if there are various ways you can do it. But it is a challenge because whenever an institution gets eroded and corroded, there is a time gap between a new medium founded, or a new structure or a new style replaces it. That's the problem we're going through right now.
Right. So just some quick questions here. This one again to you, Sam. Why do mainstream TV channels run shows that entail so much shouting? Is it something that gets high TRPs? This is a question that has really been on my mind also. Why so much shouting?
I have that answer, I think.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you, Shalini. It's a question that has got many answers. The first answer, I think, is the matter of expending money on a program, cost of creating a program. The second one is ideation. And the third one is the extent of connect it has with its audience. Now let's go one by one. In short, I think it's a lazy form of journalism, with all respect. With all respect to all talk show hosts, not participants, with the producers, with the media organizations that organize talk shows back to back. 8 to 9, there's one, 9 to 10, there's another. They just fill up, just like how they've got to use time between news slots. They could do it with a very good, well-produced documentary. It would cost them a bomb. It would cost them the research work. Doing a documentary is not a joke. And I think it's, so you just get a few people, some of them very well informed, like Mr. Narayan, others who want to just be there, others who just give the decibel effect. And you put together and you make an instant khichdi. So I think that's a very big factor. And the others flow in, like your TRPs, your creating a new vocabulary altogether. Our country, we are at the boil. Should we go nuke Pakistan? Should we go do this? Should we go do that? Look, let's take a step back and see what things are. We don't have the patience for that as media organizations who do that. I'm sure that, and B, the amplification effect that they get out of this, that such organizations get out of it, is, I think, something phenomenal, which feeds back into perhaps advertising revenue. I've not studied it in detail. These are my
Okay.
these are my thoughts on that.
Madhavan said he had the answer.
Shalini, let me again come with an out-of-the-box answer to that. I believe some of these answers lie in Freudian psychology. When people are upset and they are outraged, they want somebody to sound outraged on their behalf. It's a sort of a resonant empathy. And when people were upset with, two major issues that have been affecting the general public is the safety of women as well as corruption. So right-wing ideologies take note of this effectively. And you see, a lot of people are led by what affects them in their daily life. So today, for instance, petrol prices go up and you are upset. That means you think it's your problem. But the fact that you can afford a car is what makes you worry about petrol. And that places you in the top 5% of the country. Now, so what happens is then a lot of the loud voices or loud journalism is supported by what I call a new underbelly of the middle class that feels upset over a lot of things. But as we can see from all the Arnab Goswami jokes and memes floating around, at some point, loudness becomes an object of mockery rather than an expression of writer's rage. So everything runs its own course. Today, I find that there is a change in the tone of the right-wing anchors. Some of them have shifted to slightly more informed sounding podcasts as opposed to shouting questions. So, but TRPs are falling and the YouTubers are rising. And therefore, what we are going through is a transition syndrome where the old is not yet given way to the new, but there will always be a market for outrage, just as there's always be a market for sex and pornography. So the question is how we take it as a challenge and not overestimate its importance, because it's like movies. Today, romances do well. Tomorrow, thrillers do well. Even in cinema today, most of the movies releasing are nationalistic and patriotic in color. Now, it changes over a period of time, but great storytellers use the public, estimate the level of emotions of people, and then address it suitably. And I find that the liberal media, the so-called liberal media, they are in love with their own idea of credibility. The whole idea is credibility is like what I say underwear. You wear it inside. You don't, it should come out in what people think of you, not what you think of yourself.
Right.
And that
Do
involves
you
a lot
also
of
think that
tricks.
it
Yeah.
could be a part of, sorry, I was just wondering whether this whole shouting business could also be part of the Indian fondness for spectacle. The loudness, the moving text, and the jumping out text and theater. Do you think that has something to do with this?
Good question. May I answer that? I think there
Yeah,
was
I
a
was
time
asking.
when
Yeah.
Shalini, I think the inspiration for the old tribe of journalists, to which people like Sambandan and myself belong, we were inspired by the Guardian and New York Times and BBC.
Oh, yeah.
Today, there's a whole tribe which is inspired by Fox News and let us say National Enquirer of US. So it's important to realize that some of things are uh, inspired by role models. Some of the things are inspired by the times, and it is not, theater and theatrical thing is not unique to India. US also has it. Britain successfully managed coexistence of tabloid media and national media. There is old meme that anybody can watch on YouTube, which is from Yes Minister, where it says the Times is read by those who run the country, the Daily Mail is read by the wives of those who run the country, the Guardian is read by those who think they ought to be running the country, Telegraph by those who think they are imagined they are running the country, and the Sun, the readers of the Sun don't care who's running the country as long as they get their picture on page 3. So it's something like that. Now, so there's always been a fragmentation of the narratives, but I think to answer your question, some of those issues are related to cultures. France has a culture of outspoken Charlie Hebdo kind of expression, both in literature and in India. We have there is a new fervor of patriotism, which is part of the cultural renaissance. But one of the problems with cultural renaissance is that it throws out the baby of modernity with the bathwater of colonialism. And some of those issues are profoundly related to that.
Right. So I think we are almost out of time, though I would like to take one more question. Maybe we can have a quick answer. Somebody has asked, what could be thwarting the print media to discuss or probe the intelligence and security related issues relating to the Pahalgam tragedy? If you could answer in short.
I can
Yes,
answer
please.
that question along with another question that was missed in your thing, which I
Okay.
one of the problems with Indian journalism now is that there is an assumption that good journalism leans to the left. I want to address that question because somebody said about, uh, uh, monopoly and claim to sharing of power, communalism. There is one of the reasons why right wing has succeeded because left wing assumed the moral superiority. Now, that itself needs to be questioned because as a country develops into an economy, there are multiple narratives. So if you take caste, for instance, Ambedkarite narratives is there, but alongside there you also have a Dr. M.N. Srinivas's theory of sociology And so various narratives need to be sorted out by middle journalism. Now, alongside, you asked that question about Pahalgam, and one of the problems with this, the left assumes that everybody has to think of the lowest common, the poorest people and the most oppressed. The right assumes that anything related to national security is sacred and secretive. Good journalism needs to address both issues from the middle. So my own feeling is that it's possible for journalists to do so by using language and storytelling effectively. And some of the voices that need to be amplified is that if journalists don't say it, the opposition will say it, and that needs to be mainstreamed into the narrative of storytelling so that the questions are raised. Now, there will always be a pushback. Today, see, the Right to Information Act is being pushed back. The Official Secrets Act used to be invoked in the good old days. So journalism everywhere. And Julian, we have spent an hour and a half without mentioning Julian Assange. The way he was persecuted only shows that whichever country you are, even if you're in UK gave a safe haven to Karl Marx, but ended up jailing Julian Assange. What does that tell you? That free media is ideal. It is not a consistently occurring fact. So you will have to go that extra mile and use, as I say, I'm back to creativity. Ultimately, good journalism and good politics always have to intersect. But for that, you have to understand that you'll be dedicated to factual accuracy and truth, and not necessarily to ideologically to the left or to the right. Which is where I think some of the challenges lie in our ability to intellectually understand the problem.
So, let me wrap up this session now with just one last.
Yes, Sam wants to say something. Sam wants to say something.
Yes, go ahead.
I think what Mr. Narayan brought the panel between Karl Marx and Julian Assange is quite profound. We live in very different times now, and we live in an age of new populisms, a whole range of issues that should be confronted and discussed dispassionately are overtaken by a lot of probably fallacy-based passions. So to sum up our entire 1.5 hours, I think tying into what the questioner also asked is that the spirit of inquiry, the quest for a free interflow of news and distinct differences between news and views is something which is very precious for society and which should be safeguarded at all costs. Vigilance, as they say, is eternal. And I think we should all pull our strength together on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's well said.
So, just to summarize what we discussed today, yes, what I believe from what we have heard from both of you, it is not all gloom and doom. I was very happy to hear that this is just a transitional phase, and we'll probably come out the other side, quite strong. Some new words we heard today from Madhavan, and such as EMI journalism, social judiciary, black swan journalism, and then the excellent idea of maybe giving infrastructure status for journalism, having a stratified crowdfunding for media organizations, as well as the concept. And I'm happy that you derided the concept of citizen journalism altogether. Just because it does demean it. And Sam, your insights into what was and how things are moving, those have been very, very valuable. So I must thank you both for your time and your patience. And I apologize for the bit of fluctuations at my end. I don't know, today the current kept coming and going. But I'm really grateful to Anekdhara for giving us this opportunity to discuss without losing our tempers and without a shouting and slanging match, in a very measured fashion. What ails Indian journalism today? Sorry, yes?
No, I said, why
Yes,
did you
Madhavan,
not
you said.
shout? The nation wants to know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, probably it would have got me some more eyeballs, but never
Please
mind. This is
remember,
where we are
if
really trying to. Yes.
I think people are afraid more of humor than of factual accuracy. This is what I've learned in 10 years of declining journalism.
Charlie Chaplin was a classic example.
Right. So thank you to the organizers and to both the participants, Sam and Madhavan. It's been a great show, and I think there are a lot of takeaways for all of us. And long live journalism. Thank you.
Back to Madhu, yeah.
Before we wrap up, I would like to thank Dr. Shalini Narayanan for moderating the webinar. And speaking on behalf of the organizers, I would like to say that I enjoyed the webinar so much, learned so much. I'm sure all our participants, given the way they've been posting the questions, I think I enjoyed the webinar too. I want to thank my technical team, especially Pratyush and Anekdhara, for making the poster. And we will host our next webinar on 25th May, the theme which we'll be announcing shortly. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Pleasure. Are we done?
Yeah, we've gone offline.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.